So we've got a great panel of people here. We're going to, because we really want to talk about talent and give it the full worth of it, we're not going to do introductions, but you can see all the fantastic names of our panelists here, and you'll get to know and hear of them very, very quickly as we dive into this. So we started this sort of panel with the idea of a question. So I'm going to do a quick straw poll of my panelists and ask them a question, and they're only allowed to answer yes or no. Do we have the right domestic talent pipeline to plug the skills gap? Anna?
No.
It's kind of a bit more nuanced, but we'll get into that, but no.
I promise to say no, but no but. We'll talk afterwards why.
Yeah.
No.
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 No. So that bit was staged. The rest of this conversation is completely natural. Okay? The reason that we always wanted to fill this is that how could you actually say that we don't have a skills gap? There's some bits where we get on to. We're in a growth industry. Growing industries always need more people. It's a really interesting area which I want to start with because actually, you know, the ONS released the jobless rates just today of 3.8%, which is increasing and climbing. So why do we still have a talent gap? And that's the sort of things that we're going to unpick today. Where we want to kind of start, and I'm probably going to come to to Claire first of all, to talk about, well, where are the gaps? Because we hear so much about it's all about Python programmers. But is it really just about programmers?
Do you want me to,
yeah.
Want me to come in? Yeah. No, it's about more than that. And I think that's where the challenge is. We've got the mismatch of people in the labour market and the demand for skills from employers, and that's nothing new. I think when we look at the skills that people need, it's not just as simple as detailed technical skills, in particular coding languages. We need people with those skills, of course, but also the behaviours that underpin those. And I work at the Financial Services Skills Commission, and we work with many firms across the industry to identify the skills that are needed and try and build those skills. There's currently 48,000 vacancies in financial services as a sector. That's not just FinTech, that's across the whole sector, which is huge. It's one of the biggest gaps of any sector in the UK. And when we say, yep, we need software developers, yes, we need data analysts, but we need also to have underpinning skills such as creative thinking, relationship management, teamwork, because those are the skills that get the expertise through into products, into new design, into new services. So it's not just as simple as very deep technical skills. Yes, there's a place for that, but there's a broader question about skills across not just those looking for work, but those actually in the labour market already.
Okay, and Lloyd, maybe coming to you as well. Obviously, at Mana Search, you're dealing with a lot of recruitment side of things. Where are you seeing the major gaps within the industry at the moment?
Everywhere. But what I would say is we're into a phase now where if you look at the last decade, a lot of amazing talent has moved into FinTech. Now we're in a period of time over the last year where capital isn't being deployed and valuations are adjusting. But if you kind of, zoom out and consider what the next decade might look like, we have experienced, passionate talent, and then we have the next wave coming through. So overall, I'm incredibly bullish on the next 10 years for the talent that's going to move into the markets. And it's going to be better than the next 10 years as we have growth businesses, IPO. And what that will come back to is a shift in the mentality. Why wouldn't you go and work at Goldman Sachs? Why wouldn't you go and work at big tech? Why wouldn't you go into AI now? All of these type of questions, it's incentive. Am I going to get the career I want? Am I passionate about this? Am I incentivized correctly? And do we have an American attitude? Is it entrepreneurialism? I believe there is. But I believe now, over the next 2 years, it's time for all the different facets that come together to be incredibly bullish and excited about the platform we have, but it's not a given.
Okay. And so kind of skilling on that sort of gaps area, Jennifer, we were talking a little bit before about we perceive a lot of gaps at the moment, but is there some actual operational areas that could mitigate some of these gaps? And so are we talking about not just gaps in actual individuals and talents, but gaps in sort of operational knowledge of how to structure companies, etc.?
Yeah, so some of the conversations that I've seen, and they've shifted over the last 12 months, kind of at board level and with founders, it's been, it started as recruit, and everybody was kind of really sort of trying to bring that talent in. Now the conversation is starting to kind of mature into, well, what actually is our operating model? What capabilities do we need? What's really differentiating for us? Where do we need flexibility? in our operating model? Where do we think we need to scale up and down? Actually, what risks are we looking at, and what does that mean? So I think, you know, there is a much more mature conversation to be had about kind of workforce planning and how you tie that into your operating model, your strategy, your risk management, and also sort of you then can start to look at, do you use partners to kind of take some of that flex? And you know, you only have to look at, say, the City of London to see what kind of lessons we can learn from there, because actually, you know, but sort of as part of my previous background in insurance, the reason that the London insurance market is so strong is because of the concentration of talent in one particular area. And that doesn't just mean within the organisations that are doing business, it also means all of the supporting skills that are around that, and the relationship that the city has with some of the local educational establishments as well, and how much work they do. There's a lot more work to be done, but I think it's quite a broad question of where you drive your capabilities from and what operating model you need in your organisation.
Okay, and Dirk, sort of coming to you on the side of you from obviously the VCs, your portfolio companies, have you seen sort of a transition or an area where there's been a lot of requirement for people and you're thinking of different ways of addressing that?
Yeah, most definitely. I think first let's look at where we are today rather than where we were 18 months or 2 years ago. I think 18 months or 2 years ago there was a real lack of talent, particularly in the engineering side. I think there's been a bit of a release there. The heat coming out of the market last year and the valuations of the listed firms have released some of that talent back into the market. So I think there's something different about today than 18 months ago. But there's also more flexible kind of models that businesses can use. And I think we also have to look at what's good for a scale-up with 50 plus people is not quite the same talent search that's done for a startup that's got 3 founders and a couple of other employees. So we're actually seeing quite a lot of outsourced models, so outsourced CTO, outsourced legal counsel. There's quite a lot of these kind of services popping up that allow companies to get access to all the different kinds of skill sets that they need without having to employ a full-time person.
Yeah, and I guess, I think you mentioned it to me earlier, it's like the idea of actually you're in a growth industry which is growing exceptionally fast. If you're if you don't have enough talent, then you would be doing something wrong. If there's too much talent, then you wouldn't be in a growth industry.
Well, that's right.
Quite an interesting point.
Would be the definition of your industry's in decline if there's excess talent, you know. So it's probably a good thing that there is you know, a desire for more talent that's available. That, you know, you have supply and demand. There's demand for more talent. We need to find ways to build that supply.
Okay, and kind of moving into that sort of build, supply and pipeline, coming to Anna, obviously on the tech side of things, it takes quite a while to build someone from a 5-year-old person up to a tech person. So what's your sort of take on how you can get that pipeline growth quicker?
So Code First Girls has created one of the largest pipelines of female tech talent at the moment in the whole of Europe. And we've actually taken on the one hand, sort of attracting women from different global markets to learn about different tech skills. And we take it all the way through the pipeline to targeting local regions where we know companies most need talent. So if we work backwards, right, it's not rocket science, but a lot of people are shocked by this. If you say, look, let's go and ask the employers where they have jobs, what the skills gaps are going to be over the next 5 years, and then let's look to those local communities to see actually how many, what women on their local doorstep has that level of talent, and what skills do we need to produce, and in what ratios, because it's not going to be for everyone, right? Can we build up those local talent pools? Can we get companies engaging with their local community? And can we replicate that in different parts of the world? So for example, as long as we've got a local community-driven approach, but we say, okay, we can provide data about that, we can get you the best talent on your doorstep, we can build it on your behalf in the name of your brand. But at the same time, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be driving global consistency on your behalf. Because guess what? The learning outcomes are going to be the same. What these women can do once they get on the job is going to be the same. But we're going to give you a local data insights picture into what women want in Warsaw versus what women want in Birmingham. what a grad wants in Walsall versus a career switcher. So our approach has very much been about pipeline and about creating those local communities of diverse talent for companies to tap into.
Okay. And I guess maybe coming back to you, Jennifer, quickly on that is thinking of what Anna just said, building pipeline is good for the future, but if a company only knows what's happening in the next year, do we think there's other things that we need to do to sort of part fill the pipeline at the moment while the actual talent is being created?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is, and there's lots of companies can do. So obviously they take the traditional route of poaching, which is one of the things. It doesn't really help the industry as a whole, but
I was going to ask Lloyd about that in a minute.
Yeah, well, but that's I'll let Lloyd talk about that. But there are. I think people really have to. You can look at the mix. So clearly, you can look at where there are partners, people that you can partner with those types of skills. But I think there's also a big piece about looking at how you recruit as well and how you attract. Because we all know there are off-putting things that people quite often put in their job descriptions. There are things that make roles not so open to people. We all know that if you put too many requirements in there, people won't apply, women more heavily than men. So there are lots of things that you can do, and that is one of the gaps, actually, is looking at your talent and recruitment specialists. So really trying to kind of get the right talent and recruiters in who understand your industry and who understand some of the talent pools that you should be attracting before you then try and attract the talent. So for me, it's kind of that. It's making sure you have those organisational conversations first, that you prioritise what you need, you make yourself as attractive as possible, and then the piece that I'm sure we will explore in some detail later is how do you prepare the ground so that you understand the conditions that the people that you want to join want. There's no point bringing them into a very top-down driven organisation if empowerment is the thing that drives job satisfaction for people. So there's the inclusivity, both in preparing the ground for the people that you want, but also to kind of keep people once you've got them in.
Let's just wind back slightly and come to Lloyd, not about poaching. We don't want to talk about that. But just thinking from your experience, obviously, in searching for key roles that companies are coming to you for, are you finding that they're coming to you earlier and you're being able to help plug that gap before it becomes an issue? Or what's your sort of feedback on how we can sort of bring talent into the businesses now rather than waiting for the pipeline to build a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll talk about poaching to start with because it's an interesting point. I have to think, is headhunting adding value or not? So my determination of that is that what the market needs is some incredible winners, and particularly in the UK. I think we need to have some Coinbase level successes. And so if you are a venture capitalist, if you're a headhunter, if you're a professional service business, you choose lanes. You might think, okay, in wealth management, I think that this particular makeup of this founding team in this business is exponentially better than the others. So when we make that decision, we partner with them over a long period of time, and then we drive the best talent toward them, which then I think has a flywheel for the whole space. I was talking to somebody yesterday evening who had spent some time early on at Revolut, then had gone to Tink, and has now founded an incredible FinTech business, which is crossing over into telco, which we're seeing a lot of now, which is really exciting. So that's an example of an individual who we proactively moved around and now has the experience to go build something exceptional. So yes and no, Mark. Some founding companies are fantastic at fishing for themselves, and what we do is very low touch every now and again when it's an incredibly niche, growth management role or whatever it might be. Or perhaps we need to think about how to softly change the culture, make it more diverse, make it more inclusive, and then we can get on to retention at some point. And some aren't. How long does it take to get the right exceptional person in? Depends on the role. It can take 9 months, it can take 2 weeks, it depends on the surplus of talent. So there are things in the UK at the moment, cyber and fraud, blockchain, data analytics, where we have a shortage of talent in FinTech, no doubts about it. And those organisations need to keep on scaling into that funnel. They need to have a very long-term approach.
Okay. Dirk, sort of thinking of that from an investment point of view and your portfolio companies, have they found more innovative, interesting ways of sort of plugging their skills gaps as they're growing?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned already just before the use of outsourced kind of models, and we're seeing that work really well. Actually, it's sort of the main one that they're utilising. But you know, particularly in the engineering world, it's rare to have an only in-house engineering team. For example, you might have some in Kuala Lumpur, you have some in Ukraine, you have some in Bangladesh. This particular industry is very widespread. Whereas, you know, your legal team are most likely to be in-house and close to you, or even if they're outsourced, they're just down the road. So I think this is interesting that some things are very global, and it requires a very different kind of management style. The way that you manage a dispersed workforce is very different than a very localised one. But just I wanted to touch on the thing about retention and mobility. I think this is they go hand in hand. You know, if you retain staff over a long period of time, that has some benefits. But if staff move around through various different organisations, the things that you learn by moving is really important. So it's retaining staff is not the be-all, end-all. Having staff that have rotated to various different organisations, I think, is also really important.
Okay, that's interesting. Claire, from your point of view, thinking about sort of skills and everything else, we're going to walk into retention now and sort of asking that sort of idea. What's your sort of feedback on what things are being done now, and then what things we need to focus on to build?
Yeah, I think just before I come on to retention, I just wanted to echo what some of the others have said, because looking at talent, you've got to be working across all possibilities, and I use the 4 Bs. So you've got to build talent internally, you've got to buy in, you've got to recruit talent. You can borrow it, you can outsource, or you automate, bot. And you know, you've got to have a plan across all of those things. And Jennifer's point about strategic planning, making sure that the talent angle is part of the strategic plan. It's not sort of like, right, we need someone in 2 weeks, who can we phone? Because the talent is just not there. And I'm glad that your diagnosis of which skills are shortage is exactly the same as what we get from our members. So there's a lot of competition. And I think, so as well as looking at the offer, the point about what happens when people are in is really important. I've certainly seen examples of when firms have gone really big on attracting talent. This is some of the sort of bigger incumbent firms, gone big on attracting talent in, and they've not stuck. They're not sticky talent because the process for onboarding and embedding them in the business was not thought through and wasn't right. So they drifted away quite quickly. So it's super important to have deliver on the promise of what you're saying is going to happen in the company, and making sure people want to stay. Because I always say if you can solve your retention problem, you've solved your recruitment problem. Not to say people shouldn't move, because they do. Let's accept it. Around 10% of people in the whole industry move jobs each year. But if you can retain good people and build them, then you're really solving some of your recruitment problem. And it's not just about remuneration. It is partly that, let's be honest. It's always partly about remuneration and the offer, the package. It's about the working style. It's about leadership. And some of the work that we've done at the Commission with our members, and we have 38 members across the whole industry, is around measuring inclusion. We can look at diversity, absolutely need to look at that, and there's things we need to do looking into deeper pools of talent and more diverse pools of talent, but inclusion is how people feel. And we built an inclusion measurement tool, which is on our website, just so people can start to ask questions in a structured way to say, how do people feel about working here? And we undertook a survey across many thousands of employees across lots of firms, and it threw up some really interesting pieces. Again, the research is on our website if you want to have a good read. But it showed that fairness matters. People want to know that they're treated fairly. If they aren't considered for progression or for new opportunities, they don't tend to mind so much as long as they know it was fair and open. They don't want to be stereotyped. They don't want to be pigeonholed. So those inclusion things really matter. And if people get bored of it, they don't like it, they will go. And it's such a hot talent marketplace at the moment that firms really can't afford to not think about inclusion.
Okay. Coming to you, Anna, on the sort of retention side of things, because the company name kind of suggests it's about youth and getting youth into codes, but I know you're also doing quite a bit of work in getting people to re-enter the market, and I think there's a project that you're doing in Wales to help people come back into the working environment afterwards and get into coding. So do you see that as part of this retention and basically keeping people and retaining them and re-attracting them effectively?
So we specialise in over 18s, and our community is broadly split. So we trained 110,000 women to become coders. They're broadly split between women that regard themselves as fresh graduates or in their penultimate year of university, and approximately the other 50% are career switchers. The three biggest career switching communities are accountants, nurses, and teachers. Typically professions that women are in, whereby they feel completely burnt out. And when you ask women, and when you ask our career switching population why they want to move, there's always two answers that typically come top, which is investment in me and purpose, which is completely at odds. It's great, right, for people picking up some of these incredibly talented women, because let's face it, if you're picking up a career switcher, the return on investment is absolutely phenomenal. They're usually, it's something like in excess of 50% of our career switching population already have established managerial skills on top of being able to have coding skills. So it's a fantastic return. That'd be the first thing I'd say. But let's go back to this purpose point and investment point. When you go out and you ask the majority of organisations, which I did recently, what percentage of your budget would you say you spent on attraction versus retention? 90% on attraction and 10% on retention. So that for me seems absolutely crazy, because the thing that's going to make women stay the most is actually investing in them and giving them a purpose to build, giving them something that they can feel passionate about and technology that they're going to feel excited about. But unfortunately, I think tech companies consistently miss the mark. And another thing that drives me absolutely mad is boom and bust cycles in technology. And we've just seen it with all the big tech companies, right? They'll spend loads of money getting all of these really incredibly talented individuals in, and then they'll just lay them all off. Because all of the money and all of the strategy goes into the attraction piece, they're not actually thinking about the retention piece at all.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm going to have to come to Dirk on his comments on that one as well, because that has happened, doesn't it?
It certainly has happened, and I think it's a change in cycle thing also. But we should learn from the change in cycle. I think what we saw was companies who raised funds in 2021 or the beginning of 2022, it was growth at all costs. And so as soon as they had settled around, then they went out and hired X number of people, put them on full-time contracts, and then all of a sudden, six or 8 months later, realised, oh, hang on, we have to switch our business model from growth at all cost towards a profitability model, profitability as fast as possible, in order to maintain the reduce burn rates and also maintain the working capital that they'd been able to raise to extend runway. And so I think, again, the more kind of flexible working models that can be introduced, that, when you raise money, you have to have in mind that, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to raise again in 12 months. I've got to make that last longer and got to look for more flexible ways to implement that money, so that you don't have these really large overhead costs in terms of staff. That because it's disruptive to have a whole lot of new staff members. It requires a lot of onboarding, but it's even more disruptive to have to lay people off. So in order to manage that process, I think that's something that is very good counsel that we try to give to the founders that we support, is that, be prudent in the way that you employ staff.
Yeah, and I think maybe coming to Jennifer on your sort of understanding of working with boards and various things, are we changing that mindset in some way? Do you think is there hope for the future, that we maybe not do this boom and bust all the time? The eyes said no, but...
So I think at this point in time, yes, because we're obviously at a point in time where bust is quite fresh in the memory. Yeah. So, but I think, it's... I'm not sure boards generally learn things for the long term. So
I see lots of smirking along the panel.
It's a selective memory, isn't it?
and also, but boards do have their own refreshment cycles. So I think, there is a real need for organisations to keep some of this memory. because it's damaging both to the organisation, it's damaging to the individuals, it's damaging to everybody to kind of go through these cycles. What I think boards have learnt from this particular cycle is that it very much felt that, you know, recruitment was the answer. Bring more people in. I saw lots of dashboards, you know, how many people have we brought in? And people began to understand as they did that, they didn't have the skills to manage the onboarding. They didn't have the skills to operationalise and scale. And I think those things are much more important now we're moving into this kind of build on profitability. Don't just think about kind of your next funding cycle. So I think boards have felt that. They have felt how what they asked for didn't give them the outcome that they wanted. And I would hope that that being fresh in the memory, if we can keep reminding them of that and sort of keep pulling that point back, I think that will definitely, for the next couple of years, have been built into the cycle, I hope, in some places.
Okay. Can I jump in for 1 second? Because I think we talked a little bit about boards there, and it's important to recognise that you have to recruit for boards also. Boards have to be fit for purpose, and you have to have a strategy for ensuring you have the right people on your board for the stage of the company that you're in, and whether it's market focus or stage of the business in terms of size, you have to make sure that the boards are fit for purpose too.
Okay. I was going to sort of come to you, Claire, and ask about sort of like the skills and services that are sort of are you seeing a trend of changing to reflect any of that? But I don't know if that is at board level or is that within organisation level. I don't know if you...
We're seeing a shift at all levels, if I'm fair, and which is encouraging. And I agree with you. You know, the board recruitment strategy is, you know, incredibly important. And what's needed is changing. We did some research about 18 months ago around what skills leaders need in the sector at board level, emerging leaders and at C-suite already, and that is shifting. And one of the key things, you know, tech was in there, ESG, but one of the things that came out was this sort of a different approach to management. And I don't think anyone would say we're in command and control anymore, that's kind of gone, but there's a real sort of drive to shift away to more of that inclusive style of management, and we are seeing that come through. For example, many of our firms have prioritised coaching behaviours and coaching as a skill that's essential, particularly with remote management and remote working. And we're seeing that investment not just at the very senior level, but all the way down to sort of more, you know, much more junior level, but management, and seeing that as a real critical skill. So everyone has to have it, which I think is incredibly encouraging. There's still more to do and further to go. But what we do see is that firms that have taken the strategic approach to identifying, okay, what skills will we need in the future? Let's invest in those and build those, which feeds into the retention point that Anna was mentioning. People feel that they've got that investment in them. They are seeing, these firms that are investing are seeing a bigger reduced need to recruit. So they're seeing that in their recruitment budget, etc., because they are retaining people. And I agree with Anna's point, you know, you need to think about where the bulk of the investment goes. Is it attraction, is it retention, is it investment in people? Because you can invest and retain. And we have a business model that shows if you invest in retaining people rather than recruit, you can save probably about £40,000 per employee.
Right, okay. I guess, Lloyd, I was going to come to you finally for that sort of last bit of the question is, obviously, as we were talking about, you know, people spend a lot of money on attracting talent, which, you know, would be in your sort of area, but retaining talent as well. How do you see that sort of playing out?
Yeah, so in the Mana Group, we have the search business. We also have venture partners and we have labs. So with labs, we've done a lot of work with Imperial College on sentiment analysis in companies, specifically around engagement and therefore retention. And we conducted a massive survey across the UK, and it's just tiny little things to the point where people just feel recognised. They might not really understand where they fit into the trajectory of the mission. And so these are, I think, perpetuated by the fact that we have distributed over the last few years because of events. There's some positives out of this, and there's been some negatives in culture. So I think that it's refreshing to start seeing people functions going onto boards now, and we're starting to see that, which is really good, and actually becoming CEOs of organisations more and more. So an example I'd give is a shortage of talent that we have, for sure, and I mentioned blockchain, is specifically smart contract development. You can take somebody with relatively good functional programming, which there's an okay-sized market of, and in 3 months, they can become a smart contract developer. So if you have that talent within your organization, being agile of thought and thinking about how to upskill them into that is definitely something we're starting to see, but there needs to be, back to the point about the next 2 years, a lot more of that.
Okay. Well, that's kind of handy because we're just coming to the end now. So I was actually going to go to each of you and say, in the next 2 years, what do we need to have done and where will we be? And I was going to perhaps start, if we could, with you, Jennifer. What do you think your key takeaways are?
So we haven't really talked a huge amount in terms of the more structured education system. And I look at kind of where we are with universities. And actually we haven't talked that much about bringing skills into the country either. But actually the most visas that we issue are student visas. So in terms of developing and educating people born in this country, but also people attracted to this country by the education system, I think we really need to start joining up some of these things and look to be developing through the education system as well, those kind of skills for the future.
Okay, fantastic. Dirk, come to yourself.
I completely echo that. You know, I think it's definitely both buy and build, to use a software term. You have to build the talent from very early age up. There are specific skill sets that relate to the technical kinds of jobs, the engineering jobs, but also the entrepreneurial kind of mentality that can be taught. You know, we've seen there are some specific schools that produce a disproportionate number of successful entrepreneurs just because of a particular group of teachers that were at those schools. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be attracting talent from overseas either. And there's a whole range of things you can do, whether it's through student visas or you know, supporting the ecosystem in general to make it an attractive place to come and work.
Okay, fantastic. Claire, from your side?
For me, it's similar about building the skills, and to build the skills that you need to plan, you need to know what skills you need. So that forecasting, making that strategic choice about talent and building it as part of the business plan is crucial. So forecasting and then actually taking the leap as you know, Lloyd's, I've got loads of examples of similar, you know, firms that have said, right, we need to get some skills over here, let's put people on 12-week boot camp, and it's been incredibly successful. So many volunteers to go on the programme. People really want to engage. They can see the opportunity and say, yep, I'm going to invest. And the firms are reaping the benefits of that through the skills they've got and that retention. People stick when they've got that investment. So, yeah, take the plunge.
It gets more and more difficult as we get towards the end of the panel.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that. That's why I'm leaving you guys till the end. But Lloyd.
Clutching for some niche. Yeah. So the whole brand is Mana, and it is that because part of it, of course, is skill set, the CV, but a large part of it is connecting the passion. And, you know, I think a lot of pressure's put on talent to go do that right now. I think it should be perceived, particularly with the tools that are around now, as something that you're constantly getting experience, looking for, trying to connect with that passion. And I think what FinTech in the UK needs to do right now is several things, but really allow people to visualize why would they come into the space and have a wonderful career. So things like what you're doing with the Financial Times, Mark. I think we have a podcast, Searching for Mana, where we're trying to put the spotlight on amazing innovators and founders. Anna, you've been on this. Mark, you had a collaboration with us. Innovate Finance right now, what's going on here? Like, look at how much enthusiasm and passion there is from a bunch of people with experience and a platform. I think that we just need to really choose to go and like drive towards everybody kind of connecting into FinTech. There is not a shortage of talent. We went around 7 universities to their FinTech societies. 10,000 students applied to come to our In Real Life event from several societies. So the demand's there, but they don't really know exactly what to do. So we just need to elevate that visual path.
Okay. And last but not least.
I'm going to be a bit controversial.
I thought you might, that's why I left you to the
end. I think from a diversity angle, there's a really unique supply and demand issue, including visas. if you take how many qualified women we're going to have by 2025, there's going to be 1 qualified woman for every 115 tech roles by 2025. So my message to everyone in the audience, particularly if you're an organization, is you need to invest in alternatives to the computer science degree if you want to even dream of getting any diversity into the tech ranks of your organization. And that investment is purpose-driven, it's educational-driven, and it's linked back to a job, and it starts in your local communities.
Fantastic. And I think, you know, from everything we've heard here, I think there's a lot of things we need to do. There's a lot of mindset changing. There's a lot of restructuring. And I think everybody on this panel is contributing to that. So thank you all very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.